Another person in a unique position is Robert Millner, chairman of the investment house WH Soul Pattinson. Now in its 120th year, Soul Pattinson started as a chain of pharmacies. Its founder was Louis Pattinson. Robert Millner is his great-great-grandson. Soul Pats not only survived the 1990s recession, but also the Great Depression of the 1930s, with a record of paying out a dividend each and every year. So Robert Millner's lessons of survival and opportunity are worth listening to.
But Soul Pattinson, we're in a different position to a lot of other people because we didn't have any borrowings and we've always had cash. So we're in a position that unfortunately a lot of other people weren't in, that we actually were making pretty good money at the time without doing anything.
And what about yourself? What were you doing for a job? How were you viewing this as this significant recession sort of landed? What was happening to people around you?
Well, obviously I was on the board at that time, and we was involved in Indonesia actually at the time, developing an Adaro coal mine. But I can remember through the pharmacy, etc., because we were still very big in pharmacy in those days as our own banner, that we were struggling retail-wise. Bit the same as what we're going through now. You see the retail figures in the last few days. Starting with David Jones yesterday, came out that said that some of their figures are down up to 30%. So it's a difficult time.
So do you think there are parallels between what happened then and what's happening now? Can you see parallels?
Well, I mentioned the interest rates. So we're only now at about 4%, 4.1%. I think the historic average in Australia is around about where we are now. But I think I know in the 90s we didn't have the threat of what we're seeing now with energy costs. I think that's a big thing that we all need to be alerted to going forward. And labour is going the other way as well. I think we've got to get some more unemployment, unfortunately. And we're talking about 7 or 8% pay increases in a time when people are struggling. Like, I know people need those wage increases, but is it good for the economy?
So, therefore, what's your outlook in terms of where the economy goes? Does it go to a recession? Does it go to a slowdown? Where does it land here?
I think we've got to get some sort of a slowdown. As I said, when we were all at school doing economics, inflation and interest rates had to be about line ball. At the moment, we've got inflation around 7%, and as I said, interest rates around 4%. So, as I just mentioned, with energy costs, labour, things like that continuing to go up, it's hard to see inflation coming down. So I can see interest rates at least 1 or 2 more hikes to come. So that's going to, I would think, cause further pain and cause us to have some sort of a slowdown, unfortunately.
So you've told me back in the 90s you had no debt and plenty of cash, which meant not only did you take advantage of higher interest rates, but also of opportunities that came when asset prices fell. We haven't really seen asset prices even want to fall this time around. So what's the strategy this time around?
Well, again, the reason we ever took on debt was in a couple of years ago when interest rates were virtually zero, we took the advantage of borrowing a small amount of money, and we're well cashed up at the moment. We've got over $600 to $700 million, so we're looking for opportunities which I think we'll start to get probably towards the end of the year.
So towards the end of the year, as the economy slows, maybe recession, maybe not, you think that's the time when asset prices come under some pressure and maybe some of the opportunities start to arise? Well,
you'd have to think so. We were chatting earlier about the office vacancies. They're now about 20%. In America, they're 30 to 35%. So I would think there's got to be some interesting activity in property. And unfortunately, there are probably some businesses that'll come under stress. As again, I don't like to sound like a vulture, but we're sitting in a very comfortable position at Soul Pattinson, ready to go.
One of the things about WH Soul Pattinson over a very long period of time is not only the businesses you've invested in, but the stocks you've selected. And it's generally all about cash flow, big cash flow. So is that again the mantra as you're going into tougher economic times when you're looking for investments, when you're looking for things to invest in?
At our last presentation, we actually showed a graph that we actually do better when things aren't going as well. So we've never missed paying a dividend since this is our 120th year as a publicly listed company. We've never missed a dividend through the GFC, the Depression, the war years. So that's something we're very proud of, and we're looking forward to continuing that on.
So, but to go to that stock selection side of it, when you're thinking about the stock selections, the opportunities that might arise, how do you actually arrive at those those decisions, those things that you were going to invest in?
Well, most importantly, people, because we've got about 45 people in this office, so I can't send someone out to run a retail shop or a coal mine, so we've always backed people. And I think that's been the key to our success, is picking good people to run good businesses. We haven't always picked the right ones. We've had a couple of boo-boos on the way, but generally speaking, we've done very well out of picking the right people.
And that success in terms of, as you say, you don't want to sound like a vulture, but there are opportunities that do arise, right? And also just asset prices if they do come off. So again, it's the people. What else is it that actually might give a person a clue, even from looking back in the 90s, when asset prices then tanked massively?
Well, we've never worried about businesses. We've owned TV stations, which has now ended up as TPG. Again, they've got to be cash generating. They've got to generate good cash. So without good cash, we wouldn't have been able to pay these dividends out that we have over the years. So good people and good cash generating businesses. And we're not frightened to go into any type of business.
That's interesting, because how do you go with changing trends that we're seeing today? I mean, there's all these new technology businesses, there's companies that don't ever create cash, that, you know, rely on the shareholders to keep tipping in more and more money. How do you judge all of those as the technology moves so quickly?
Well, that's one of the things we sit around this table once a month and talk about as a board. Is the business we're looking at the moment going to be around in 10 years? As you said, with the changing technology, I think you've got to be a bit more careful now than what we used to be in picking winners.
Tell me about the banks back in the 1990s. I mean, Westpac almost went through. You had the State Bank of Victoria fell over. The State Bank in South Australia fell over. I mean, you had Estate Mortgage. You had Pyramid Building Society. You had a lot of things that went broke. Tell me about the attitude of banks then compared with now.
Well, it's a bit hard to pinpoint the reasons why, but you're right. Westpac was 2 minutes to midnight going under. Kerry Packer saved those. And the other interesting thing is, if you go back and have a look at our top 20 stocks, there's not many of them that haven't been close to the wall. BHP nearly went down. National Bank nearly went down. Most of them have had a pretty close shave over a long period of time, and we're still here after 120 years.
So then, back in the 90s though, the one thing that probably accelerated the recession at that time was the credit squeeze, that the banks got frightened of lending and really ultimately started sending people and businesses to the wall, and that just pushed asset prices down. Do you think they're in better shape today than what they were?
Oh yeah, we're very fortunate here. I think we've got particularly the Commonwealth Bank's probably the strongest bank in the world. The other three aren't far behind them. But going back to what you were talking about, there had to be some problems. If you had interest rates at 17%, unemployment at over 10%, there were people out there, and I know a lot of my generation were just starting off then, had bought a house 4 or 5 years before, and all of a sudden got slugged with these massive mortgages, and unfortunately some people had to walk away from the houses. It was pretty sad.
It was really sad. People did walk away. There was no work. So the trick of that is that the employment side is one of the tricks. As you say, more than 10% unemployment. Today, well, it's been 3.5, perhaps heading to 4.5, 4.7. While some people are going to hurt, so long as people hold on to jobs, they should be okay.
Well, that's according to the guys who, Michael Hawker sits on our board here, and he's on the Westpac board. And that was one of the things he was saying at the last board meeting, that provided people can continue to hold their jobs, things should be reasonably steady. But once people lose their job, it's very hard to support your mortgage.
That also goes to the heart of the banking industry, doesn't it? They've got to maintain confidence, because if they start to squeeze credit up to business, to households, that's when this could become a whole bunch worse.
Yeah, and we just hope we don't get to that point, because you never like to see people suffer.
That's the point about this. It's still about the people, isn't it?
Well, that's right. There's a lot of people out there that haven't got a lot of spare cash. Unfortunately, time they pay their mortgages and everything's going up. It's incredible. The cost of doing business now is frightening.
And then take me to government, because government has a role in this. There's a Reserve Bank, sure, controlling interest rates, but the government surely has a role. Government back then effectively probably had no choice as to where the economy went. government's always got a choice as to how they spend and who they support.
Well, I think the government should have been more proactive on energy for a start. You know, Australia's got to where we have because we've had cheap energy. We've got plenty of coal, plenty of gas. We all want renewables, but you can't have them yesterday. We've got to wait till we get enough battery, enough wind, enough solar. If we want to go nuclear or we want to go hydrogen, then you turn off your coal-fired and gas-fired power stations, but not before. There's going to be a lot of pain before this is over. And I know because I'm in the coal industry and we have copper and zinc operations as well. See, I can't build a new copper mine now because I can't get approvals. So if I gave you an approval tomorrow, it's going to take you 5 or 6 years to get that copper mine up and running. So you're closing down the base power now and we haven't got anything that's going to replace it.
And so that being the case, that doesn't actually alleviate inflation.
No,
that drives up inflation while you've got a lack of energy.
Well, that's right. And people are going to get 7 or 8% more to run your mines or work in your mines. We're lucky to get people there now.
And Robert, final one for you. When you look at this right now, are you optimistic?
No, I'm pessimistic on where we're going to go. Unfortunately, as I said, higher interest rates, labour costs, power, energy costs.
And what about Australia as a place to be over the next 20 years?
Well, we've always been the best country in the world, but I just hope we don't bugger it up.
Robert Millner, many thanks for your time.
All right, good to talk to you, Ross. Thank you.